Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your marriage without your man's conscious effort so that you feel desired, taken care of, and special, even if your relationship feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today I'm sharing insights from the husband of an empowered wife as part of our man panel. This is part 2 of our man panel. My guest, Dwight, is not a student, but rather the husband of a podcast guest and a relationship coach trainee. He generously agreed to be part of our Man Panel series. And today I'm going to get his perspective on the changes in his family as a result of his wife using the connection framework and the 6 intimacy skills. So get ready to hear the male perspective on what makes men attracted to their wives and wanting to be her hero. But first, here's a shout out to his wife who invited him on the show on my behalf to be a guest and to talk openly about their marriage on this very popular podcast. So brave. Thank you, Ruth, for fearlessly sharing your husband with us on this podcast. If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes. My guest, Dwight, is not a student, but rather the husband of a podcast guest and coach trainee. And he generously agreed to be part of our Man Panel series. And today I'm going to get his perspective on the changes in his family as a result of his wife using the 6 intimacy skills and the connection framework. So get ready to hear the male perspective on what makes men attracted to their wives and wanting to be her hero. Dwight, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
It's good to be here with you today, Laura.
Thanks.
And thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, I would love to hear what things were like in the bad old days in your marriage.
Well, to be honest, we really haven't had bad old days. We've had a pretty good marriage, solid from the very beginning. Probably, I guess, everyone has rough spots, and I guess that's how you would describe probably what we went through. And I probably precipitated the situation. And a few years ago, I lost my brother kind of rather unexpectedly. And so I do what I think is probably common to the male gender. I kind of withdrew into a shell. And so I think that, Ruth, more or less kind of wondered where I went and what was going on and why I was there and why I wasn't there with her. So as a result of that, she began to reach out, and not in a confident way. I think that a lot of it was out of fear, right? And not sure of what was going on or what was, missing between us. And, so that probably precipitated the struggles that we had that I really didn't even notice were that big, but for her, she felt alone, I think, and distanced. And her method of reaching out, became, out of frustration and, probably out of emotional loneliness and distance. And so through this program, she's realized that she is the keeper of the relationship, and she has the power, right, to open me up, and not through any method of control, but through patience, right, and love and giving. And she has really helped me to heal. Is probably the best way to put it. So,
wow, I love this. Well, that was all. That's great. Thank you so much for the inside view of what was happening in your marriage. It's so valuable. And it makes total sense that you were sad and withdrew. You were grieving, it sounds like, that loss. And I love how you describe it. She was reaching out, but not from a place of faith, but from a place of being afraid that,
Yeah, fear.
or maybe even feeling rejected a
Mhm.
little. And and how did you respond when she was reaching out? Sounds like she was maybe, I'm sort of picturing like she's kind of poking you, like, hey, what's up? Like,
That's
where'd
probably
you
what it felt
go?
like.
Is that,
That's
yeah.
yeah, good way to
Okay.
describe it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I responded like I was being poked. And and that is to withdraw even further, to create more distance, to push back. The exact opposite of what I needed to do, number one, as a leader in our family, but also to heal. What I didn't realize was a significant rift in our relationship. So
Yeah. And so it sounds like it created some tension, to say the
mhm,
least.
mhm,
And you were feeling it and she was certainly feeling it.
mhm.
And what was there a moment when you just thought, well, we can't go on like this? Like something's got to change in this marriage.
To be honest, I never did feel that way. I was always confident that that this would blow over. Um, but I was over here dealing with my things is really what the big issue was. And so she was dealing with things on her own. And as she has probably told you or will tell you, one day, our oldest son came in. He said to me, he said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Dad, do you love mom?" I said, "I'm crazy about your mom." And so then he went and asked her. He said, "Mom, do you respect dad?" And she said, "I don't know." And she didn't know what that meant. And so she began to seek. And when you seek, you will find.
Mm,
Yep.
you're getting me all choked up already. We're only been talking for a couple minutes here.
Yep.
So,
An
so
awesome
you
path, actually.
really, I
Yeah.
want to hear all about it.
Well, it's like, when you start a relationship, it's fresh and it's new and it's exciting, and you're going all these different places and you're learning new things about each other. And so, in many ways, that's what it was like for us, right? When
Yeah,
she began to learn that she was the keeper of our relationship, and that we could be as close as she expected us to be, right? Yeah.
expected. What a great word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in spades, she has healed the rift that was between us, or the chasm that was there. Uh, and again, it was in no part due to her. Um, so
Very sweet.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
she was able to
so
overlook and see beyond the situation that we were in. And I've always, I think, had great expectations for our marriage from the very beginning, and had faith that we would finish well. And so maybe that's even one of those things where I wasn't perhaps even worried or um, concerned in ways maybe that I should have been, as an attentive husband, as an attentive partner in a relationship.
hmm, well, Dwight, you're so accountable, and that's is very endearing, and I love that. I want to hear though, because it sounds like you were in earshot when your wife said didn't know if she respected
No,
you.
that
No,
was
you
that was
weren't.
something she shared with me. Yeah, later
Later
on.
on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And so,
Whew.
for a long time, she started your program as a student, and she never told me that's what she was doing. She never said, "Hey, I'm doing this Laura Dole program," or anything like that. But she was doing this, kind of on the side or whatever. And I'm gone a lot. Typically half the time. I'm an airline pilot, so I'm out of town.
Oh, okay.
At least half the time, every month. So I was gone a lot, and the meetings and the phone calls and all that sort of stuff really didn't I didn't have to notice it that much, but she was just kind of doing it on her own, on the side, all that sort of stuff. And so, one day she was talking about, she said, I'm doing this and you know, maybe I'll open up later and kind of tell you what's going on. She reached that point where she said, hey, this is kind of where I've come from. And this is where I feel like our relationship was, and this is where I feel like it's now. And she felt like she could share a little bit, and she had always wanted to be someone who had an answer, particularly for younger women who were perhaps just married, for her daughter-in-laws, for those people who were close to her, right? Looking for answers in the early days of their relationship. I think that we all need hope, and we gain that hope from the people that we see, that we admire their relationships. Those people we see that we want to model our lives after. And so she wanted to make sure she was in that position. And she truly feels like this program has given her the tools and the insight into herself, right? And this is where it all begins. And this was really the only advice that I ever offered to my two boys, is that until you know yourself, don't ever, get involved in a relationship with another person. If you do not know your own motivations, if you don't know the reasons for your actions, if you don't know yourself well enough to understand what you're doing with another person in that relationship, then you just become predatory in nature. This is the selfishness that comes out, that we see in the world all around us, and in all relationships, business relationships, family relationships, husband and wife relationships. It's everywhere. So.
And I love that. It sounds very wise. How would your sons know that they know themselves well enough? I'm just curious, because I want to learn.
That's a good question, right?
Right.
How do you know that you know yourself well? Well, when you begin to understand your own motivations, why do you want to do this? Why do you have a desire to do that? What brings you inspiration to these various things in your life? When you begin to see the root of that, rather than, hey, this feels good, or, I want to go over here, so I'm going to do that. Or I want to spend this money to buy this thing, or whatever it is. These things and if you don't know what's motivating you to do that, then those are the things that are controlling you, right?
Yeah.
And when you begin to understand, seek the motivation, build a path, I think, for yourself in the direction you're going, and particularly with relationships that you're investing in that will be lifelong relationships, long-term relationships. If you don't know where you're coming from and what motivates you in that relationship, then it can never be anything more than a facade. So how do you know when you've reached that point? That's the difficult question, I guess. It has to do with the self-awareness, but it's not something you can train into somebody or share with them directly.
It kind of sounds like the path we're all on is trying to become more self-aware all the time. And but it really resonates with my own experience in my marriage, that as the more self-aware I became, the more it blossomed. My marriage really transformed from that self-awareness. So it totally makes sense to me what you're saying. So your wife shared a little bit shared with you a little bit about what she was doing. Did you notice anything else, or how did you notice that she was doing something different than she had been doing? Do you remember when you first realized?
That's perhaps she offered more space. What I needed, and some of, the things that I was dealing with was space. And perhaps she offered that. But there was confidence. There was peace. I think probably peace, because if you don't have peace, you can't, everything's off a little bit. And maybe that's what I saw the most was a peace that had come upon her that allowed us, when we were together, to enjoy ourselves and to, I don't know, be free, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. To feel like the tension had dissipated a little bit, it sounds like.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
And the friendship was back, maybe. Is that
And the relationship was back, and that opportunity to, go and do things and learn more about each other and enjoy our time together, like you said, without tension. Um,
so
the
you were
opportunity to
back
be in the
in
moment.
you were back in in a
Yeah.
way,
Back in
right?
life.
Back in
Exactly.
okay.
Right.
And so never out of love, it sounds like, but back in from this. So what did you see her doing differently to bring that about? Or was it
Um,
just more like a magic show and you just didn't really want to know how it was
well,
done?
yeah, it was kind of like a magic show. And in many ways, because, what she was doing was, I know it was very deeply personal for her. And so the last thing that I want to do is go dig around into that aspect of her, right? Um, to respect and to honor that part of her personhood, uh, so that she could develop that as she saw fit. That's not the kind of input that I could offer or would want to go tinkering around with. So, yeah, but I know she did grow, and this is a lot of what she shared. She said, this is really about me. And she said, I'm understanding myself more than ever before, and I'm understanding what motivates me. And she says, and I understand now what has motivated me to try to, I guess, tinker in your life is maybe a good way to put it, or to control things that she didn't feel were necessarily what I should be doing, or whatever, those type of things. And uh, yeah, and she became, I guess, just confident and peaceful. Yeah, free. Yeah.
And so that poking stuff, that stopped, it sounds like.
Mhm.
You weren't
Yeah.
feeling as poked. And how did it affect the way you see your wife? If we compare like a split screen where before was
Mhm.
where you are in grief and wanting to be in your cave and she's poking versus where she's saying, I've learned a lot about myself, and she was able to give you more space, it sounds like. How did that?
Well, yeah, so a lot of times, and I think, as we go through life and we have, events happen, sometimes it takes a while to really understand and kind of know what is going on. And so, I'd reached a point where, I was dealing with some grief that I never felt before, didn't understand it, didn't have words for it, right? We have these things, and, everyone has them, and they cover the full spectrum, I think, in life. And it can be, I don't know, job disappointments, major life disappointment. I mean, it can be any number of things, right? That we haven't experienced before. We don't necessarily have words for it. It affects us in ways that we can't deal with right up front. It's not something we can wrestle with physically, right? For a guy, that's kind of, that's
That's
where
true.
it really fits. And all of a sudden
Yeah.
you got something else going on over here that you can't wrestle with physically.
Yeah.
And so you got to
Yeah.
figure out how to deal with it. And so for me, having that opportunity to do that, uh, and in a over a period of time, and reach a point where I could sit down and go, okay, now I know what this was about, and now be able to talk to her, right, and express myself to her, and to communicate, without a fear of tension or frustration, or any of the negative reactions that come in. Um,
Oh, yeah. So it sounds like
that's
you went on a journey, like you went through your a kind of a dark period, really, it sounds like, and
yeah.
came out with more self-awareness. Um, but did your view of your wife change at all in that time or no?
Um, I don't know if my view changed of my wife. I'm kind of crazy about her.
That's
Uh,
good. I like that.
yeah.
That's
Um,
awesome. Yeah,
but to say that I was endeared to her um, is probably the way to describe it. Yeah.
that's a great word to
Yeah.
describe it. Yeah, I love that. And Dwight, how important is it to you that your wife is happy?
Oh, very important. Right. So this is, a lot of people, and again, this is something that oftentimes goes unstated. But you'll see it in memes and you'll see it in the casual off the cuff comments that people make all the time. If mama's not happy, nobody's happy, right? um uh our youngest son has a friend who had a company a number of years ago that was a matchmaking service, and it was for the rich and famous. um And so one of the things that she talked about was whenever she sat down with a client who was a female, they had a list of requirements that were a mile long. And it was very specific. And a man had only three requirements. One, that he was physically attracted to the woman. Two, that she was nurturing. And three, that she had a hobby.
A hobby.
A hobby.
This is
So, meaning that
fascinating.
she was obviously motivated and had something in her life, right? That, so a guy doesn't have words to go beyond that. So, if you want to dig in and figure out what that is, it's fulfillment apart from him. And I think
Mm.
that one of the most attractive things to men is to see a woman who is whole and complete within herself first, right? She knows who she is. She knows what she's about. She has a purpose that is fulfilling to her. Um, and with the knowledge, not the knowledge that is conscious, but the unconscious knowledge that within that fulfillment, she's happy. And within that happiness, there's peace. And that peace brings joy and freedom in a relationship. And so the primary goal, I think, in every man in a relationship with their wife is that they're happy. A man brings flowers so that she's happy. A man builds a house, right? Like she wants, so she's happy. A man provides these things, gifts. I mean, that's what the man's role is, right? To bring these baubles.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
for
she's
her to
she's
point to some throw pillows and say, I would love those, and him to
right,
bust himself getting those throw pillows or whatever it is, right? The goofy things.
right, right,
I shouldn't say goofy. I mean, my husband is astonished at how many throw pillows we have to have at our house.
right.
So
Yeah, yeah. You
yeah,
could fill the house up with
yeah,
throw
yeah.
pillows.
But he keeps them coming. He keeps them
Right,
coming. So
right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. So I really hear how important it is. Um Now, so I want to go back to that respect thing because at some point, she told you she wasn't sure that she respected you.
Well,
And
so that's what she shared with her son, right?
okay,
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
And now, when you heard about it past tense, it sounds like, so that by the time she was
Hmm.
telling you, her
Months had
message,
gone by.
her message had changed. Do I have that
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes. Hmm.
And um, how how respected are you feeling?
Oh, wonderfully respected. Yeah.
All right. Well, give me some examples of that. What's making you feel so respected?
um, that's going to be hard to quantify. That's something probably I'll have to stop and think about. But I feel like that. So, for many years, so when we first got married, I was in the Navy, so I was gone a lot, and by a lot, I mean uh, 278 days out of a year. So we had a partnership that was always clicking on eight cylinders. We never had a misstep. We never had any issues in raising our kids. during that time that I was gone and back home, and then in the short periods of time that I'd be home, we worked together so well that it was completely seamless. I'd go away, she took care of all the stuff, and we know how things go wrong as soon as, the guy who can fix the car or the lawnmower, the, whatever, as soon as he's gone, boom, then it all breaks and everything comes apart. And she was able to deal with all that stuff so that when I came home, it was seamless. And when I returned, I was the man of my castle, and it was a time of rejoicing, and we always had fun. It was a celebration when I was home, and so that's really kind of how we lived our lives. And even after that, there were some challenges with work. I got hired at Delta Airlines in September 11th. I was ended up furloughed, and I was out for 5 years, and I ended up working three jobs. And so I was always, kind of in motion. And she was able, like a dance, right, to be there, and to bring our kids along at the same time. And it was perfect and it was seamless. So we were operating as a team. And so, once our kids left home, then, all of a sudden the dance changes, right? And now all of a sudden, she's not needed perhaps so much. And so now we get into that thing of like, well, are we doing this together? What are we doing together? And what are we doing separately? And, and when I'm gone, what is she doing? And then here's this opportunity to where she's got perhaps a vacancy in her life. And how do I fill it? Right. It's a new dance. And so I think we reached a point where there was no requirement for us to take every step together. And maybe that brought in a little separation. I don't think that that's necessarily bad. It's an opportunity for growth, right? That you don't have when the house is full and, your calendar's full and you got all this stuff going on. But we have now come back together. The best way for me to describe it is that we're back in rhythm together. And so our life is, as it was before, harmonious. We're working together in the little things of life. And she may have shared, we've recently purchased a little place up in the mountains. And so the cycle of life is much different, right? The pace is much different. Your priorities are much different. And it's really wonderful. The timing is wonderful because it gives us an opportunity together every day to go through these motions without distraction together. So the dance, I guess, is as it should be, as it was in the beginning. And, for the 20 years, 18 years that we had children at home, it's like that again. And that's probably the best way to describe it. Because for those 18 years that we did have children and we had a lot of things in motion and all the balls were up in the air, it was absolutely perfection and seamless, and never a question or a doubt or a struggle. It was just, we were just moving through life, just in the best sort of way. And so we're back to that place again. Yeah.
That's an incredible accomplishment, Dwight. Even really pre-intimacy skills, it sounds like you and your wife. I mean, I just consider that an enormous accomplishment to raise children, to stay married during the wonder years that are also the hectic years,
Right.
and to have it, and for you to be describing it as seamless. It was just perfect, really. I'm very impressed by that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys are role models for other people, because I think that's kind of a rare thing, what you guys have done.
Yeah.
So how would you describe it now? I mean, you kind of just gave us a picture of it, so I don't want to dismiss that. You really did. But how would you describe your marriage today?
As it was in the beginning, and I mean the beginning, right?
The beginning.
The
Okay.
beginning. And that early part of that journey, again, like we were talking about before, when it's new and it's fresh and you're learning about each other, and we're kind of in that place again. And we've had so many things kind of happened in our lives here the last, I don't, well, probably maybe since she's begun the program. That might be the best way to describe it, right? Where we both have personal growth independent of each other. But when we come together to discuss, hey, what's going on in our lives, we find out we're moving in the same direction. The same things are being revealed so, and this is kind of what happens when you're first married and you're in the honeymoon phase, right? Learning new things, learning about each other. It's exciting. It's kind of where the focus is. And as your awareness of self and life, happen, and you share that with your spouse, and it's always a moment of joy when you can share these things with someone else. And now we're in that same place again. And how would I describe it? Inspirational, free, open. Yeah, there's just joy. It's joy and peace.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Those are powerful words to describe your inspirational and joy and peace. Yeah, congratulations. I just admire that so much. So what do you think you would say to a couple who's maybe where you were in that rough patch, and there's some pain, really, a little bit of distance, some fear, and they are wanting what you have now: inspirational, peace, joy, and all this success with raising your family. What would you say to them? What do you suggest?
Well, apart from encouraging their wife to become a student of Laura Doyle, and that may be where I would have them start. But apart from that, if we derive our motivation out of seeing the person who we love become the greatest person that they can be, if that's our motive, if we wake up in the morning and we say, okay, well, what have you got going on today? How can I support what you're doing? And Ruth has got, oh man, many talents. She's an artist. She's a writer. She's a photographer. She's, she does all these things. And seeing her grow in those areas is probably the most fulfilling thing to me, right? So if you have two people and they're, battling out over the issues, the issues are never the issues. The issues are the symptoms. Change the story, move the bar, change, rearrange your environment. Don't accept the circumstances. And how you do that is you literally do it by getting your mind off yourself, right? And seeking to build someone else up. And perhaps aside from becoming a student of Laura Doyle, that's what I would offer to them.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And your children, you're empty nesters, you said. So
empty nesters.
Yeah. So
now
all
for
your
9 years.
For 9 years. Okay. Yeah. So would you say that your wife's studying the intimacy skills with the connection framework, has that had any impact on your children?
Yes. So obviously, our oldest son, who saw what was taking place in our relationship, probably even better than I did, which is kind of a sad statement, but it's really how it is, right? The things that are closest to us, oftentimes we can't see.
Yeah. Especially if they're painful, right?
Especially if they're painful.
We have incentive to look the other way. I think that's
yes.
Yeah.
Right. And he had shared with me, once before, and he's a very, he's a writer and he's a philosopher, and he's very deeply thoughtful and philosophical in how he approaches life. And one of the things he said, seeing you and mom's relationship is what gives me the confidence that I can have a relationship with my wife that ends well. And this was something that he told me years before. any of this, I guess, rough patch was part of our lives. But it was just him sharing, how he saw life and how he sees life. And it was something I never thought about. My parents remained married uh, until my mother passed away here 10 years ago. And so I had relatively decent models for parenthood and for marriage as well. And so I think I took a lot of things for granted, never considered it. I think that my son was probably exposed to, a lot of other stuff, friends who their parents went through divorce while he was growing up, and seeing their side of the divorce and what they were going through and how they viewed their parents through that period of time, and then after the divorce. And so he was seeing very far down the road, and seeing that he needed somebody to model this. And we do. This is something I talk to people a lot about, because in many ways, my parents' generation, I don't believe that they've necessarily modeled well, the finish, right? And it's odd, and I see it and I recognize it now. I recognize it actually, for a long time, for many years. I've seen that, there's big gaping holes of knowledge, perhaps, that I would like to have gained from my parents as they went along. Um, Maybe a maturing perspective that perhaps wasn't there, that I would want to be able to pass on to my children and to those people of my children's generation, right? So they're prepared for what's next in life. And many times, I feel that my parents' generation, for the most part, much of what I was exposed to, was still tied to their youth. And you see it so many times. You can be around a lot of people who, their glory days were in their youth, and it's not, shouldn't be that way. When did you decide to stop living, right? When did the adventure end? And if you feel like the adventure ended, what have you done to either kill it or to move forward to create new adventure in your life? Life doesn't, end back there. And how we got that model created, I don't know, but it's not the right, we know it's not the correct model.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, having that insight and some feedback from my children probably made me more aware of a lot of these things myself, right?
Yeah.
To allow me to maybe do some introspection, right? And maybe to move forward with a plan, right? Not to be, but to provide that modeling, to share parts of my life that weren't shared with me, that maybe I would have been good in my maturity.
Mm. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. It's important how you finish too. We all start out very
yeah,
hopeful and excited. You've managed to keep that. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. I think we have a duty to keep it.
yeah, that's right. I think so too.
Yeah.
And who's the duty? Why is it your duty? Let me ask you that, to keep it. I agree, but what are your
Well,
duty?
uh, you know, we've been given life, we've been given time, we have been given gifts of knowledge, of wisdom, of the ability to move, to create, and to do things. Uh, so we've been given this. It's not something that is a part of us. It's been what's been given to us, and so we now have a choice, right, to live to our greatest self, to use those things that we've been given to the best of our ability, or to, I don't know, stop and look back at our glory days. So I think the duty comes from that's, I think anybody can look at that and say, well, that's wrong. If you've been given these things, why squander them? And every day should be an opportunity for growth, personal growth, um, growth in your relationships, obviously with the people you love the most, your wife, your parents, your children. You know, a lot of times for many people, you know, when their children are out of the house, that relationship in many ways ends. And it should be an opportunity for a new beginning, a different kind of relationship. But many people see that they're 18, they're out of the house. You know, that was kind of what the world was like, you know, in my generation growing up. There were these, you know, there were these gates with doors on them. The doors were one way, and you know, when the door closed, that was it.
That's
And
right.
see you later. You're on your own now. And you know, that's kind of life went. You know, people went in two different directions, and I think that's closing a door onto relationships and opportunities and growth that should be a part of our lives and something we should look forward to and rejoice in and be excited about. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So one of the things I've heard from the men on the man panel from time to time is that when their wives started practicing intimacy skills, seemed a little suspicious. There was a little bit of mistrust. Did that come up for you at all?
Um, no, no, you know, I can't say that it did. You know, Ruth, perhaps where I might have noticed something suspicious was her desire to apologize for certain things. She goes, "I'm getting on your page again," and I'm like, "That's okay," you know, because it tells me what you're experiencing and how you feel too. That's not a big deal. But when she did that, you know, it opened a door, right? It opened a door for communication. So I didn't see it nearly as suspicious as I did an opportunity. Um, uh, I guess when I married Ruth, I had the full confidence in her and in our relationship. So there was no doubt, you know, so I didn't have that kind of suspicion that,
Oh
wait a
no.
minute, what you got going on? You know,
Yeah.
if you know, you got a little program under here, you're trying to control or manipulate, you know, my side of the
Yeah.
of life. And so that I didn't see it as that at all. I saw it as an opportunity. Um,
Yeah.
and it
That's
has been
great.
an opportunity. It's been a great opportunity. Yeah.
Ah. And how have you changed since she has made these changes?
Well, I have gotten excited about life again. Probably is the easiest way to put it. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So it's really ignited something in you.
It has. Um, you know, and you know, again, a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of um, grieving in ways that I didn't know existed. So, you know, you hear people talk about being depressed a lot, and you hear people talk about like, you know, waking up in the morning and not wanting to get out of bed, you know, and that kind of stuff. I I wasn't like that, but I think I was to a place in my personal life where I just lacked the motivation to grow or to build or to see, you know, long term or even midterm, and be excited about anything in that midterm. And since, you know, Ruth and I have gotten back to a place of peace and joy and friendship, it's motivating again. And you know, in the early years of our relationship, we were she's a very adventurous person, so we're always out adventuring, you know, and we spent and this it was in travel and it was, you know, outdoors, and we're both outdoors people, and we spent a lot of our youth together in the outdoors. And we've been in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex now for almost 20 years. And, you know, and it's not a place that you can spend a lot of time outdoors.
Oh,
uh,
too hot and too
there,
cold, huh?
there's certain, yeah, it's either too hot or too cold. And, you know, I used to scoff at that. And, but after 20 years of living there, I can pretty much say, you know, it's either too hot or too cold or, you know, in ways that you know, we didn't struggle everywhere else we've been. I'll say that, you know. But it is interesting. It does have an impact on your life, and you may or may not realize it up front. And I didn't, you know, because like, you know, people would say that, and I'd say, yeah, you just keep telling yourself that, right? And I'm going to go live my life and make the best of it. But it is We found that we weren't spending a whole lot of time outdoors, and we wanted to be outdoors, and we wanted to be adventuring in the way that we had previously. And so we're back to that place again. So we're doing some traveling. We're
Got that
spending a
place in
lot
the
more time in,
mountains.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, places
Yeah.
where we've always wanted to be. So,
So there's like a sense of fun ahead, it sounds like.
absolutely. And you know, it doesn't have to be anything necessarily huge. It's the kind of the way that we've spent our time in the early days of our marriage when we were out adventuring around. It was nothing monumental
No.
or extravagant. It's always the simple stuff that's the best. uh yeah. And so
Yeah.
we've um taken the time to make some decisive changes in our lives to return to that place that we want to be, instead of drifting down the river of life, being controlled by the external forces. We've decided to take some of that back, and we're doing it together, and that's the best part. you know when you don't when you're in a relationship and you don't feel like you're together, then you don't feel like you can take a step, right? Because you're taking a step in one direction, they're taking a step in another direction. And I know that animosity in relationships can build to the point where they're taking a step in the opposite direction just because you took a step in this direction.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
there's that pull, and there's that tension, and there's that struggle, and it doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. And you can decide to change that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this leads me, you went a long way towards answering this next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Dwight, what is your vision for your family going forward?
Well, the vision that I have for our family is that in many ways we continue on the path that we have set forward. Uh, we we all get along together. So my wife and I and our two boys have great relationships, and both our boys are now married. Our youngest son has been married for a year, and we love our daughter-in-laws. And so we have carved out time to spend together. And the older that they get, and as they move on in their careers, the time thing can be the challenge for getting together. And so this has been an absolute wonderful year, where we have all been able to get together as a family again. So to be able to facilitate that, Ruth and I are in a position now to where, we have control over our schedules in ways that we can facilitate that with the boys and their families so that we can all be together, spend time together, doing things that we like to do in places that we like to be. So I guess that's in the near to midterm, structuring our lives in a way that we can still spend time together in fellowship is probably the most important thing. Yeah,
It sounds dreamy. I mean, this doesn't,
it
to me, this
is.
sounds like what it is. It
Yeah,
is. Yeah. It sounds like what everybody wants, right? This
yeah,
is, I think,
yeah.
what everyone dreams of
Mhm,
having. And you've done it. You've created
mhm.
that. You have
Yeah,
that now. So, and it's inspiring to hear about your inspiring relationship. So thank you so much for all that you've shared about it. It's yeah, it's inspirational and aspirational, I guess I would
mhm.
say. Like this is what is possible
Yes,
to
absolutely.
have. Yeah, and you're living proof of that.
Yeah,
And you're passing it down, to your sons, to your daughters-in-law as well, which must feel amazing to be able to do.
it is. It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this
We
is
each have
great.
the power to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, as I see Ruth's involvement in your program, I see that you're enabling people to do this. You're giving them the tools, right, to make the oftentimes our lives are a product not of what we've decided, but what we have allowed to take place around us. Our lives are shaped by what we have allowed rather than um, what we have decided. And I think that you're giving people the tools, right, to make a decision for themselves in what they want to see and how they want their lives to be. Um, in terms of the relationship between a man and a woman, you have revealed one of the fundamental truths that has been hidden probably for generations, right?
Which
The
is?
idea that a woman is the keeper of the relationship.
Mhm.
Why don't we talk about that? Why isn't that the first point of discussion? And I know that there's millions of marriage, pre-marriage counseling seminars and marriage seminars and this and that and they're always focused on the struggle. They're never focused really on what your marriage can be like and the tools that are there to achieve it. And all that begins over here with the woman as the keeper of the relationship. The man is there, right, to stand at the door and knock, if you will.
Beautiful. I think this is why I just have so much respect for men that you're willing to do that, right? That you're willing to do all
Pursue.
these things. Yeah, the pursuit,
Yeah.
the pursuit and the providing, the baubles you mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
The flowers and the baubles and whatever it takes to make your wife happy. So yeah, well, this has been just great. So moving to hear the inside story of what's possible, and you just demonstrating that so beautifully for us. So publicly, it's very courageous. I also want to just shout out to your wife, your wonderful wife, who is in training to be a coach and will be a fantastic coach. But she did a brave thing by passing on my invitation to you to be a guest, right? This is a little risky for her.
Yes.
But anyway, so I just wanted to thank her and express my gratitude to her as well in this interview. And certainly to you, Dwight, for your contribution today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. And I really appreciate what you're doing and wish you the best going forward with your program. I know that there'll be many changes to come as things are revealed to you. But it has been life-changing for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest.
Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week, I'll share insights from the husband of an empowered wife, part 3. In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that when a website I only visit once a year says I have to change my password, I'm like, I will just stop using the internet forever.